Hi, welcome to Learnovative Agile and Scrum video series. My name is Vijay Bandaru. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, certified team coach, and certified enterprise coach from Scrum Alliance. We create these videos to help you understand the concepts of Scrum in detail with a simple terminology and easy understanding so that it helps you to implement Scrum in your projects and products easily. In this video, we are going to cover sprint review, one of the events of Scrum. So we'll cover what is the purpose of sprint review, who are the participants, and what are some tips to make the sprint review effectively, some anti-patterns which you should avoid in the sprint review. So the purpose of sprint review is to inspect the outcome of the sprint and adapt the product backlog with the future adaptations. So that means the increment, whatever is created in the sprint, will be inspected by the stakeholders and their feedback will be collected. That feedback may be in terms of new features or removal of unwanted features or existing features, modifications or reordering. All these are called adaptations to the product backlog, which will be done by product owner. And the inputs for the sprint review are primarily the increment, product backlog, and sprint backlog. The time box for sprint review is maximum 4 hours for 1 month sprint and shorter for shorter sprints. That means less than 4 hours for less than 1 month sprint. And the output of the sprint review is adopted product backlog. As we just discussed, either new items will be added or unwanted items will be removed or existing items are modified or reordered. And the participants for the sprint review is the complete Scrum team, which includes the product owner, Scrum Master, and all the developers, and the important stakeholders invited by the Scrum team. These stakeholders will be users, customers who are going to use the product in future. So how does it happen, the sprint review? So let's imagine in this picture, this person, the first person is the product owner, second person is the Scrum Master, and these are the two developers. I just used only two developers, but in general, all the developers will be participating. So first, the product owner will open the sprint review by welcoming the stakeholders, something like this. Welcome to the sprint review. Our sprint goal was to create a basic shopping cart functionality. In order to achieve that, our team have implemented these items: search, list, add to cart, change quantity, modify billing address and shipping address, and payment using one of the payment options. And the good news is all items are completed, and my team have implemented all of them according to the acceptance criteria. And I personally tested them and all of them are working fine. Now my team will give you a demo. Then one of the developers will show the working software to the stakeholders. It's a demonstration of the working features. That means the working increment to the stakeholders. So they demonstrate one by one features to the stakeholders. While the developers are giving the demo to stakeholders, these stakeholders may do two things. One, either ask some questions or give some feedback. So the questions may be answered by the developers if it is a technical question or implementation question. Or if it is a functional question, either developers or product owner, anyone can answer that question. And the feedback will be collected by the product owner. So that feedback again will be captured into the product backlog according to the priority. If that feedback is important, urgent, critical, valuable, then the product owner will keep into the top of the product backlog. If it is important but not immediately urgent, maybe it will be put somewhere in the middle of the product backlog. It is nice to have, not important, not very urgent, not very valuable, then bottom of the backlog, that the product owner will take care of it. So that is how the sprint review will be conducted by a Scrum team along with the stakeholders. So primary stakeholders or mandatory stakeholders, you can say Scrum team, and the important stakeholders, which includes users and customers. You may also have some additional people like marketing people or sales people or customer support people in terms of they as an attendee, if they want to see how a sprint review, how the product is going on, like that. And the frequency of sprint review is every sprint you will have one review on the last working day. And duration, as we discussed, it will be maximum 4 hours for 1 month sprint, shorter for shorter sprints. And it will usually be done on the last working day of the sprint. So there are some common questions related to sprint review. We'll look into them. Who should give the demo in the sprint review? So usually it is recommended for the developers to give the demo to the stakeholders, because the developers are the people who have implemented the functionality of the increment. So if you allow them to give the demo, obviously it will be more motivated to them, and any technical questions come from the stakeholders, they can easily answer them. If product owner is giving the demo, his or her focus will be on the demo. The feedback may be sidelined. So let the developers give the demo and let the product owner focus on the receiving the feedback, so that it will be appropriate. And is it fine to postpone the sprint review if only few stakeholders join? It's not recommended, because as per Scrum Guide, failure to operate any Scrum events as prescribed is a lost opportunity to inspection and adaptation. So even if a few stakeholders are attending, you should go ahead and have the sprint review conducted. And the product owner is responsible to ensure that all the requested stakeholders are joining, so that it will be more engaged and more interactive. So Scrum Master has to coach the product owner to address this issue in future if it is repeatedly happening. Is demo same as the sprint review? No, demo is one part of the sprint review. So you can say demo is a subset of sprint review. So along with the demo, the Scrum team and stakeholders will discuss other items like according to the timelines and cost budgeting, and how the market is going on, how the competitor products are happening, any regulatory compliance, market changes that might indirectly or directly impact the product. All these things will also be discussed. Is UAT part of the sprint review? Sprint review is not same as UAT. So if your definition of done says UAT should be completed, then it should be done prior to the sprint review, because sprint review is not for a formal approval or rejection of the increment. The primary purpose of the sprint review is to get the inspection and adaptation. What is the role of the Scrum Master in the sprint review? Not only sprint review, any of the Scrum events which is within the sprint planning, daily Scrum review, retrospective, the Scrum Master's focus is not on the content perspective, but in the process perspective. So ensuring that the sprint review or any other event happening, time boxing, teaching the time boxing, and also everybody is actively engaged and everybody is getting chance to speak what they want, and also making sure that right processes, right practices are used into the events, and the events are happening smoothly according to the Scrum Guide. This is the purpose or role of the Scrum Master in sprint review. Then can we have more than one sprint review in a sprint? It's not recommended, though some teams practice mid-sprint review. I wouldn't recommend, because it might sometimes defocus the developer's focus if you introduce mid-sprint reviews or any other reviews. But Scrum doesn't stop you in case the team is building a crucial item. Without waiting for the sprint review, it will be good to get some interim feedback, will really help. Then you can do it. But don't make it as a practice that, okay, every sprint should have a mid-sprint review. Not a good practice. So these are some anti-patterns which we should avoid. So a few things: stakeholders are not invited for the sprint review, or just Scrum team perform the sprint review. This is an anti-pattern. The reason being, the feedback should be received from the people who are actually going to use the product. So the real feedback comes from the real users. So if you are doing sprint review without the stakeholders and users or customers, there is a high probability of the product may turn into a wrong product. And product owner is not actively leading the sprint review. Instead, he leaves everything to the developers. probably the feedback might be sidelined and developers may not be able to handle some questions from the stakeholders. So it is important product owner should lead the sprint review so that the stakeholders and users, customers also will get a kind of confidence. Presenting the items that are not meeting the definition of done. So according to Scrum, the increment should have only the items meeting the definition of done. So presenting half-baked items will reduce the confidence or trust of the stakeholders. So try to avoid that. Unengaged or passive stakeholders in the sprint review. So this will directly have impact on the feedback. So if they don't understand what you are going to demonstrate, then obviously they will be less engaged, and or if they don't understand what the value that increment is going to get to them, then also they will have less engaging. So it is the Scrum Master and product owner and developers, all of them should try to engage the stakeholders throughout the sprint review. And no working software increment for the sprint review, rather than it's done using PowerPoint presentation. This is a must avoided anti-pattern in my opinion, because PowerPoint presentation will not give you a feel of working software. So any sprint review should happen through a working software. Working software only will help the customers, users and stakeholders to understand how the product is shaping up and the value that they're expecting, is it achieved in that increment or not. So avoid PowerPoint presentation. It should not be PowerPoint presentation. It is only working software. Then product owner reviews the item done during the sprint in the sprint review along with the stakeholder. This is another anti-pattern. Throughout the sprint, the product owner should identify the items that are done by the developers and then check them according to the acceptance criteria, give acceptance or rejection to the developers. The primary purpose of sprint review is to get the stakeholders' feedback, not the product owner feedback. That means the product owner should have approved or rejected the items throughout the sprint as and when any item is completed. Then consolidating few sprints work on conducting a large sprint review instead of conducting every sprint is another anti-pattern. People find this as a time-saving opportunity. But on the negative side, delayed feedback will lead to few important negative consequences. One, the product may not turn into a acceptable product, or the delayed feedback may attract additional cost of change, or missing the time to market, or unhappy customers. These are the negative consequences if you do this anti-pattern. Then developers not present in the sprint review, thinking that they'll be only for product owner and stakeholders. This is an opportunity. A sprint review is an opportunity for the developers to meet the customers and users and stakeholders directly. It's one of the formal opportunities for the developers to meet, understand the pain points of the customers and the wish list of the customers, so that it is mandatory for all the Scrum team, entire Scrum team, including product owner, all the developers and Scrum Master participate in the sprint review. Using sprint review for the approval sign-off from the stakeholders. So the primary purpose of the sprint review is to get feedback, not a formal approval or sign-off kind of thing. So if that is mandatory, it should be handled before the sprint review itself. Then unexpected items which are not part of the sprint goal presented in the sprint review. So that might deviate from the goal of the sprint review, where what is the focus, what was the goal we wanted to achieve, and whether we have achieved that or not. So if there are any unimportant or not part of the sprint goal presenting in the items all of a sudden, that might impact the sprint review. Not focusing on the time boxing for sprint review. So this is another anti-pattern. People might have important meetings. So if the sprint review is not conducted according to the time box, they might leave off the way to attend the next subsequent meeting. So important feedback will be missing. So it is important to follow the time box by properly organizing and managing the conversations, feedback, and if anything is going to be sidetracked, then using a parking space. All these things will help you to address this issue. Then the last anti-pattern, product owner not accepting the feedback from the stakeholders. This is another anti-pattern. So the purpose of having stakeholders in the sprint review is to get the real feedback before the product is getting into the production. So it's important for the product owners to be open to receive the feedback from the stakeholders and evaluate the feedback, whether it is valuable enough, whether it is will add any additional value, or it will bring some additional maybe performance improvements, usability improvements, or navigation improvements to the product, and then accordingly make the call. That is the reason the product owner has the right of deciding the content and order of the product backlog. So take the feedback. According to the further analysis, the product owner can take the call whether that can be part of the product backlog or not. If it is part of the product backlog, then should it be on the top order, middle order, lower order, can be decided later. So in summary, try to avoid these anti-patterns because they lead to negative consequences, something like stakeholder dissatisfaction, or increased cost of delay, or reduced transparency, or impacting the time to market, or reducing the flexibility. These are the negative consequences if you use these anti-patterns. Now let's discuss some tips to make the sprint review more effective. Focus on collaboration. Collaboration is the key in the sprint review. It's not about conflicting or fighting. Together, Scrum team and stakeholders will try to make sprint review a very, very effective and positive and productive, keeping the overall product success as the success criteria. Then increment works properly. So it is important for the developers to make sure the increment works properly in the sprint review. Probably doing some quick review before coming to the sprint review, do a sanitization test, or making a branch separately for sprint review and ensuring all the regression tests are passed on that branch, and not disturbing the sprint review branch before sprint review, or some of the tips you can take. Review the sprint and product goal. So make sure whether we are on track for the product goal and whether the sprint goal is achieved or not. So that means this kind of review, focusing on the product goal and sprint goal, will make it more of an outcome focus approach rather than an output focus approach. And then involve stakeholders actively. Sometimes the stakeholders will be not very engaged. So taking specific names of the stakeholders, or asking them to give a rating about the increment what they have seen, or taking a specific feature of the increment and then ask them, okay, how did you feel? What can be done additionally? Or if something can be done differently for this feature, what can be done? How can be done? Like that, you can bring more involvement from the stakeholders. Then reflect on the market and customer insights also. So sprint review is one where all the stakeholders, important stakeholders, customers are coming together. So it's important to discuss with them the market changes and the insights of customers or the competitor products. So it will give a more insightful information for the Scrum team. Encourage the team participation, also very, very important. So developers talking directly to the stakeholders, customers and users will have a good rapport with them, and also it will help them to understand the customers' expectations. These are the important consequences if you encourage the team to participate actively. And feed forward, look ahead. This is very important. Feedback is something you do after something is created. Feed forward is you are taking feedback even before something is done. So show the product backlog as is, and the next subsequent items, whatever they are doing, show them in that order to the stakeholders, and ensure if there is any changes they're expecting to the priority order or anything, that is called as feed forward. That is one important thing why the product backlog is one of the inputs to the sprint review. Then focus on time boxing. So it is important to have time boxing followed so that it is not leading to any halfway done review, something like that. The next tip is to have don't deep dive into technical discussions. So sprint review is to get the functionality, feature feedback and the outcome, whether we have achieved the outcome or not. So if something is required to have a deep dive into technical discussions requested by any stakeholder, you can as a Scrum Master, you can have a separate meeting with them with the respective developers later. So the focus should be on the working functionality and the increment. Then rate the review. It is important to ask the stakeholders to give a quick rating to the sprint review based on what they have observed. So it will get a kind of understanding overall how the increment has shown impact to the stakeholders. For example, 1 to 5. 1 is least effective to 5 is most effective. If you ask the customers to rate the review, it will be a kind of quick feedback. And it should be working software, not a PPT show. As we already discussed earlier in the anti-patterns, make sure the sprint review will have a working software demo instead of a PowerPoint or a document snapshots or some results taken from the database queries. Avoid these things so that it will make more lively and engaging and interactive. Few more tips are here. Give advance notice to stakeholders so that they can plan. Sometimes what happens is, if you share the sprint review invite to the stakeholders just 1 or 2 hours prior to the sprint review, it may not give them advance notice. So when I was working as a product owner, I used to share the sprint review invitation on the sprint planning day itself. So after the sprint planning is done, I'll have a fair idea on what is the sprint goal we are planning to achieve and what are the items that are selected from the product backlog to achieve the sprint goal. I will attach those things and share the sprint review, which will happen after the next 2 weeks, because we were working on the 2-week sprint. So that it will help to plan accordingly for the stakeholders to block their time and focus more on the functionality related, and you can skip the bug fixes. So to make it more effective and time can be saved. So if there are some minor bugs are fixed, you don't need to show all the bug fixing from end to end. You can simply say these are the 3 to 4 bugs we have fixed in this version, so that it will help you to focus more on the functionality related, value oriented related, and the stakeholders also will have good conversations around that. Let stakeholders test the increment on their own. So sometimes what happens is people will be more interested if you give them the keyboard. So try to give the keyboard, just explain the functionality of the increment that you have developed and let the stakeholders handle it, so that it will also give a kind of usability testing, how the users are able to access that functionality. Is it easy for them to complete the flow? These things will be available from that. And let the stakeholders know the importance of their presence. Sometimes stakeholders feel that their presence is not important. So the product owner or the Scrum Master should help the stakeholders understand that the money invested on the product development is the stakeholders' money. So whether it is invested and spent on right things or not, the feedback directly from the customers and stakeholders and users will help. So that is why it is important to let the stakeholders understand their presence and importance of their presence. And send a reminder 1 day prior to the sprint review is also good, so that it will be a quick reminder to the stakeholders and they can plan to join the sprint review. So it will bring more people to the sprint review. Next tip, make sprint review a conversation, not just a presentation. So a lot of teams where I worked as a coach, they think that sprint review means just demo the software and then get the feedback and go on. Now it should be more of a conversation. What value we have achieved? What was the product goal? What is the sprint goal? And how the sprint goal is interconnected to the product goal? And how the market changes or the economy changes or the competitor products or regulatory changes are going to impact. So those are the things also should be made part of the sprint review. And then ask stakeholders to give their feedback by taking their names. So sometimes some people will be very, very passive. They're not very actively engaging or asking questions. So asking some specific questions by selecting some people. So for example, hey John, how did you feel about the demo so far? Are you enjoying the demo? Or a particular feature, how did you find the feature? Is it valuable to you or not? How easy for you to use it if you were to use the feature? Something like that. And then let the developers decide who will demo in the sprint review prior to joining the sprint review. So sometimes what happens is when the demo is going on, maybe they change one developer to other developer. So it will be leading to a little bit of a defocus or time waste. So before joining the sprint review itself, let the developers decide who is going to give the demo then remaining developers will help them in case they need any answering the questions or just pitch in if they have any issue. So that way also it will be seamless, smooth, and interactive. So these tips will really help to make the sprint review more effective. So I'm sure you will use these tips, what you have learned in the video, in the upcoming sprint review, and let me know your thoughts on these things. Thank you so very much. And if you are looking for any public or private Agile, Scrum, Safe, and AI related trainings, this is our contact form. And please feel free to contact using the email or our website. We'll be happy to help you further. Thank you so much. If you have liked this video, please like and also subscribe. And if you are interested, please share this video for everybody else benefit. Thank you so much and have a great time.